The Real Meaning of The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz, written by L. Frank Baum, is not a mere child's story. What is Oz a symbol for? Ounces. What is measured in ounces? Gold. What is the yellow brick road? Bricks or ingot bars of gold. The character known as the Straw Man represents that fictitious, all-caps legal fiction, a person the federal U.S. government created with the same spelling as your birth name. Remember what the straw man wanted from the Wizard of Oz? A brain. No juristic person, legal fiction, paper corporation has a brain because she has no breath of life. What did he get in place of a brain? A certificate. A birth certificate for a new legal creation. He was proud of his new legal status, plus all the other legalisms he was granted. Now he becomes the epitome of the brainless sack of straw who was given a certificate in place of a grain of common sense. Now what about the Tin Man? Does Taxpayer Identification Number, TIN, recall anything to mind? The poor Tin Man just stood there mindlessly doing his work until his body literally froze up and stopped functioning. He worked himself to death because he had neither heart nor soul. He's the heartless and emotionless creature robotically carrying out his daily task as though he were already dead. He's the ox pulling the plow and the mule toiling under the yoke. These days, his taskmasters just oil him nightly with beer and place him in front of a hypnotic television until his very existence no longer has any meaning or value. His masters keep him cold on the outside and heartless on the inside in order to control any emotion or feeling that might arise. The Cowardly Lion was always too frightened to stand up for himself. Of course, he was a bully and a big mouth when it came to picking on those smaller than he. Have you ever noticed how bullies are really the biggest cowards? They act as though they have great courage, but in reality have none at all. They roar, but with no teeth of authority to back them up. When push came to shove, the Cowardly Lion always buckled under and whimpered when anyone of any size or stature challenged him. He wanted courage from the Great Wizard, so he was awarded a medal of official recognition. Now, although remaining a coward, his official status allowed him to be a bully, but with officially recognized authority. He's not unlike the attorneys who hide behind the middle courts of the Temple Bar, et al. Ad infinitum. What about the trip through the field of poppies? Did you notice how this had no narcotic effect on the straw man? No brain. Or the Tin Man? No heart or soul. They weren't real people, so drugs could not influence them. The Wizard of Oz was written at the turn of the century, so how could the author have known America was going to be drugged? The Crown has been playing the drug cartel game for centuries. Just look up the history of Hong Kong and the Opium Wars. The Crown already had valuable experience conquering all of China with drugs, so why not the rest of the world? What was the Emerald City? The Federal Reserve System. Who finally exposed the wizard for what he really was? Toto, the ugly, or cute depending on your perspective, and somewhat annoying little dog. Toto means in total, altogether. Latin, in toto. What was it that the witch wanted after she alleged that the little dog had bitten her? Toto. Everything. Notice how Toto was not scared of the great wizard's theatrics, yet he was so small in size compared to the wizard that no one seemed to notice him? The smoke, flames, and holographic images of Oz were designed to frighten people into doing as the great wizard commanded. Toto simply padded over, went behind the curtain, the court, etc., and saw it was a scam. Who was behind the curtain? Just an ordinary person controlling the levers that created the illusion of the great wizard's power and authority. When Toto pulled back the curtain and completely exposed him, the charade was at an end. The veil hiding the corporate legal fiction and its false courts was removed. The wizard's game was up. What was he after all? A con man. A fraud. We can see in this tale just how loud the bark from a little dog can be. How about your bark? How big is it? Most of us remain silent and wait to be given whatever food and recognition, if any, by our legal master. Let us not forget those pesky flying monkeys. What perfect mythical creatures to represent the Bar Association attorneys who attack and control the little people for the great crown wizard, the powerful and grand bankers of Oz. Gold. How finally was the evil witch destroyed? Pure, clean water liquidation. How at last did Dorothy get home? She simply clicked her heels. She always had the power, and so do we. What would it take to expose the wizard for what he is, tearing away his veils? We each need only a brain, a heart and soul, and courage. Addition. Also note that Dorothy did not have a mother or father reference, i.e. no sense of who she was or from where her direct heritage came. In this case, Dorothy's legal guardian was obscurely named Auntie M, or M for money. That means that money was her legal tender. Get the double meaning? Even James Bond has to answer to M. And who is M's secretary? Miss Moneypenny. And speaking of money, tin was a term for valueless coins back in the day. So Tin Man had more than one meaning, as the value of our money was degenerating once the Fed came along and produced coins with little or no gold or silver in them, and nothing with which to back them. Let's also not forget that the Wicked Witch of the West represented the bankers of the New World, America, who would control its resources and people legally, flying monkeys, and psychotropically, poppies. Dorothy's house, Equity, landed upon and killed the Witch of the East, representing a false sense of security that people from Europe felt when they trekked to the New World. Note how the little people began singing Dorothy's praises when she accidentally killed one of the banking witches. But wait, this witch was from the East, the Old World. So again, a reminder of their false sense of security through song. Though to her benefit, what often protected Dorothy throughout her journey was the ruby slippers, which were previously in the possession of the late Witch of the East. In Baum's original story, written at the turn of the century, Dorothy's shoes were silver. In other words, she was backed by silver and therefore protected against anything that might come her way. The shoes always kept their value and strength even against a scary new banker, or witch in this case. Interestingly, the movie was made just shortly after the Great Depression, which included the government's vicious gold grab on behalf of the bankers in Wall Street. Further, what was it that awakened the organics, Dorothy, the lion, and Toto, in the poppy field? Glenda, the supposed good witch, covered them in snow. Snow? Nah, it was cocaine, actually a legal stimulant at the time and in coke, of course, which worked against the effects of the poppy-based opium. Therefore, Glenda is also a ruse of so-called benevolence regardless of the legality of cocaine at the time. We've seen its effects today. And notice at the end of the film, this good witch knew the secret that would get Dorothy home all along, but didn't tell her right away. Perhaps this was Glenda's way of having Dorothy learn her own lesson. But as stated previously, the prizes given by the newly humbled wizard were themselves ruses, ersatz representations of cures and freedoms. So this journey or lesson was ultimately futile. At the end, the wizard, once he is forced to admit his trickery and subsequently provides his empty gifts, is not even charged by the people of the land. He is forgiven and let go to fly away, escape, in a balloon of all things. No matter how often we the people maintain vigilance to uproot these banking night crawlers, The message here is that because of our naivete, one of them always gets a way to start the vicious financial cycle all over again in some new world. At the end, Dorothy discovers that it was all a dream, which means that whatever lesson she learned, she did so while asleep. Notice, too, that Dorothy didn't actually need to make any noise at all. Though possessing little power, she didn't need to complain, or cry out for justice, or stir up a revolution, or even quietly sulk in discontent. She didn't need to ask family, friends, or associates to come to her aid and solve her problems for her. She didn't need to write to Congress or petition the courts or even beg the president to get what she wanted. She merely had to accept responsibility for herself, which makes this also a tale of coming of age, growing up, maturing. Dorothy had to act with maturity, deliberately take the initiative, and implement the proper procedure. That is, use what power she did possess to effect the necessary changes in her life and circumstances. In the dream, Dorothy only had to close her eyes, quietly click her heels, and think about her goals. This was not merely a leap of faith, as Dorothy first needed to establish exactly what she truly wanted, to organize her thoughts, and to act decisively rather than hold back from fear of the unknown. She could have done all of this privately before suffering the various worries and setbacks of her adventurous dream journey. Notice finally that in the dream, Dorothy needed to act with diligence and do more than simply ask for what she wanted. First, she had to prove herself worthy of being granted her request by bringing to the Great Oz the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West. Perhaps most would have considered this mission impossible, simply given up without trying, and retreated to their former misery. But not Dorothy. In the dream, she got a little help from her friends, who represented her own thinking ability, desire, and internal fortitude. With time running out and momentarily locked inside her own mental prison of uncertainty and inactivity, it was Dorothy herself who deliberately acted with conviction to overcome her own fear and lack of confidence, escape from her prison, defeat the witch and obtain her broomstick, and present it to the Great Oz. Next, she had to prove herself further by not giving up when the Great Oz insisted that she return tomorrow after he had given a little thought to the matter. Persisting, she uncovered the truth about the identity of the Great Oz, acted as a sovereign individual, and accomplished her most cherished goal. Even after all of this, with Toto in her arms, Dorothy faltered momentarily as she doubted whether her wish to return home could actually be granted. Even upon being granted her wish, she faltered again as she chased Toto and inadvertently prevented herself from being carried home via the wizard's balloon. Distracting Dorothy as he leaped from the balloon basket to chase a cat, Toto represented Dorothy's doubts, her aversion to change, and although she was discontent with things the way they were, her related preference that things remain as they were. Recall from the beginning of the movie that she was terribly upset with the way Toto was being treated by a neighbor, Miss Gulch, represented in the dream by the Wicked Witch of the West. The Good Witch of the North, Glenda, then explained to Dorothy that she wouldn't have believed that she had the power to grant her own wish, but that she had to learn it for herself. She could even bring Toto with her. So, even after making decisions and taking steps that would improve her life, she could keep and still enjoy what was most important to her.